The sun was warm as Janet sat beside the apple tree, the dower house looking over her shoulder as she opened up her notebook. 4 weeks in the employ of the lady, school over. She had her notebook open onto her most recent words as the sun was irradiated the page. Soon, it will be autumn, and all the fruits of the trees will be harvested and made into preserves by the good ladies of Downton, of Yorkshire, of England. Janet looked at the words, the letters seeming to lift themselves off the page. There was something about reading her own work aloud, something which was decisive. And this was decisively bad. "I bet your work wasn't as bad as this," Janet told the apple tree. Her mother had told her to refrain from frequenting the churchyard. It was too noisy at home, what with Christopher preparing for Manchester. Her father had gone to Birmingham and had spent a lot of time in the Ashby cottage, working on something to do with watches. Janet just wanted to write, and to write meant peace and quiet. And her best writing was done about the life of her grandmother. Not Granny Daisy. Granny Daisy, on every local committee, whose opinion mattered to everyone in Downton. Janet picked up her pen, tying in the thought to that of the harvest, of the produce stall that would be laid out, not on Downton Abbey's green expanse, all that had diggers and heavy plant equipment on it, waiting for Georgie's father to sign the inevitable and give up Downton Abbey forever. But here, at the Dower House, under Lady Mary's eye, her other grandmother, whose life was as intriguing as it was exciting. Janet opened up the family tree again, casting her eye over the page. Mother, father, Granny Daisy, Grandad Andy. Thomas, he was never grandfather, connected with a solid line to Ernest Barrow. A solid horizontal line connected me Lucina Ashby to Thomas Barrow. In the warmth, Janet traced the line from Milo, across to Thomas, and down to her father, then across to her mother, and then down, first to Christopher, and then across to her. How strange it was that it looked so neat and tidy on the page, all together, all connected. From Daisy was Mr. Mason, who had sort of adopted Daisy when she had married his dying son. "I didn't know what I were about when I stood beside Mr. Mason and William," Daisy told her. "I loved him, in me own way, and I looked at him, dying. What would it have meant to me if I said not he would die in any way?" Daisy had told Janet that story so often, Janet knew the words by heart. She remembered sitting on Daisy's lap as a child, as announcements were made on the wireless of a war in a faraway land, of ships being sent abroad. Granny had opened the Empire Atlas that she had been awarded when she had passed her matriculation examination and pointed where these places were. It was Granny Daisy more than anyone in her life that had made Janet interested in everything, in understanding the world around her, in wanting to find out about the places, in wanting to see everything. And Milo was her secret, because Milo was everyone's secret. Nobody wanted to talk about her. Yet she had given birth to Janet and Christopher's father, and had been a genius with electrical goods and done something amazing that no one would discuss, about radio waves and transmissions. "Does the tree talk back?" Janet turned and looked into the smiling face of Georgie Crawley. "I heard you reading." "Not my best work," Janet admitted. "But your great-aunt has been so kind, so generous. And I've known Downton all my life, and I should be able to write about it." She picked up her notebook. "I come to talk to Milo, and I hear her in her trees," Janet added. "Does that sound mad to you?" Georgie Crawley sat down next to her, and handed her back her Barrow family tree. "Only as mad as me talking to the portrait of Granny's granny," Georgie told her. "When I have something important to discuss and I don't want to discuss it with anyone, I sit on the bench under her portrait and tell her everything, like I did this afternoon." Janet smiled. Secrets about the Crawleys never stayed secrets for long amongst the staff. "And so you've come to tell Lady Mary?" She watched George's mouth fall open, then break into a smile, and Janet felt herself smiling too. "You'll be a great investigative journalist one day," Georgie told her. "I'm going to Trinity for the Michaelmas term, see how it goes. I want to take up what my grandfather Matthew did. I want to make a difference in the world." "So, not a diplomat, like Lady Mary wants?" Georgie shook his head. "My father should have died in the Battle of Britain. He avoided death for so long." And then, in the diplomatic service, was killed in South Africa. Kruger National Park. Umkhonto fighter. His voice trailed off. Granny was devastated. Janet knew. She knew it all. But she wanted to listen to Georgie, who had been her best friend since she could remember, talk about things that mattered to him. I think you'd make a good diplomat. You've had enough practice. When I got into the trouble I never even knew was trouble. She turned and smiled at Georgie, putting her hand over his for a moment. He took it and squeezed it for a moment, and they were 5 again, running around the ground between the chauffeur's cottage, the now derelict electricity generating house, and the back of the kitchens, eating Granny Daisy's Viennese finger biscuits and water from the well. You should go and write about what you love, what's in your heart, Janny, Georgie told her. Your other grandmother. For what? Janet told him. She took the family tree and opened it out. I can't write this for the lady, but I want to write up what I know about Milo. Somehow, I feel she deserves to have people know her. She lowered her voice. And when I'm in Manchester, when Christopher goes, and we go to help him settle in, I'm going to find out some more about her time there. Someone must know about me. Lucina Ashby there. She stayed with Rutherford. She worked on radio, even a computational machine. Write it in the lady then, Georgie told her, sitting up and straightening his shirt. Milo's a person from Downton. She's a person that the local people will love to read about. And that was where it started. Georgie Crawley's suggestion, not bold to him, but bold to Janet. And yet, hadn't Lady Edith told her as much? To write what she felt like about Downton? She shook her head. You don't think so? Janet looked across to him, shaking her head. It's not that. People are very forthcoming with facts, but there is still something impenetrable, and you want the real Milo, Georgie added, watching her face light up. What she thought, her motivations, her likes, dislikes. The real person, not just the facts. Janet shook her head. She was a real person. Everyone here who knew her knows that. But there's a barrier, like a lead barrier of silence. The leaden silence, Georgie paraphrased. I like that. He watched as Janet reached out and touched the trunk of the apple tree. Then, Janet took a folded up piece of paper from her pocket and placed it between them. Go on, she urged, as Georgie looked at the paper, curiously. Apple seeds? He asked Janet, opening up the paper. Her seeds. Look, her handwriting, genus and species, Malus domesticus. She even left a space, because she hadn't found out the cultivation. Janet leaned back, and smiled at the happy grounds of the Dower house. She loved it here. It gave her peace. The seeds. She loved apples. That's what Granny Daisy said. Eating them. Collecting the pips. She planted some here, and at Grantham House. Janet folded up the paper, and then pulled something out of her other pocket. She put the pages in front of Georgie. I rescued these from the kitchens at Downton Abbey. They were at the back of a skirting board, by the sink. She leaned in towards him. I bet, future lord, you don't know where I mean. And I bet, Georgie replied, grinning, that we hid under there when we were children, and Nanny was chasing after me. You called me over, and you found us a hiding place. It was there, then, their bond, which would sustain them in the months and years that were to come. Would it have done them any good to know what they would, in due course, find out all about to be demolished, to pay for father's death dues? Georgie told her, sadly. I'm not 21, so can't inherit the title, nor do I have any say in the estate. Grandmama is doing her best, as she does. Georgie sighed. We need money. But, Janet saw how quickly he recovered from confessing a vulnerability. There are so many plants at Downton, beloved by great-great-grandmama Violet, all gone. Janet watched a slow sigh pass through him and his gaze rest on Downton's estate. Then, to her surprise, opened something he was carrying. My own family. Dear Aunt Caroline lives with Grandfather Henry these days, and the woman for whom Grandmama never has a good word to say. Father had, in effect, 3 fathers. He pointed to Matthew's name, Mary's and Henry Talbot's. And you had 3 too. That is what no one wants to talk about, really. It started there. if it started anywhere. The Irish business, the travelling, the research and discovery of her grandmother with furious intent. Her third grandparent. He was the key to Milo, and to why no one would say. Janet would recall it in her mind, the diggers and the destruction of the kitchens that had already happened, and the dower house and Georgie telling her he was going to Oxford in the autumn. Thoughts mingled in Janet's mind, not least to remember to talk about Michael Elmers as an event on autumn, a turning point in the year's cycle where signs of autumn would begin, and to ask her father what he was working on in his spare time now he had returned from Birmingham, and why she had thought learning German was a bad idea when she would need to read at least one document she knew was hidden in her parents' room that was written in the language. I have 3 grandfathers, and I am not sure I am supposed to know about it. I am not sure Thomas is happy that I want to find out about Milo. I heard him speaking to Granny Daisy about things being in the past and should stay there. I'm intrigued. Georgie tried to humor her. There was spirit was in her. Determination. Why should I not know? And this, from her bag, Janet took a piece of paper, a marriage certificate. Yes, that Esme Lucino Ashby and Thomas Barrow. Georgie read. Yet, there's another. Somewhere. A man called George Paget Thompson wrote a letter to a Dr. Hansboth, in California about it. During the war. Something happened to Milo in Germany, she spent time there, she did some things that were very important. She felt the lightness, the awakeness when she thought about Milo, when she researched her, fill her up entirely. Milo Ashby deserved to be remembered. What will you do? Georgie asked her. Janet shook her head. I don't know ... or rather I do ... but ... your great-grandpapa's things ... there's something in them that will save me having to be tutted over by grown-ups. Will you help me? He may have information about when Milo lived at Downton, or stayed there, and about great-uncle Ernest, Thomas's friend. And I have these names. Janet took yet another piece of paper from her pocket. Georgie looked over them, as Janet continued, these are doctors ... professors ... in physics, who at one time or another, worked with Milo. They might remember her, those who are still alive, that is. Georgie said nothing for a moment, and then got to his feet. Are you going to see your grandmother now? Georgie shook his head. Come back with me up to Downton Abbey, he told Janet. And Janet got up too. Before she knew it, they were walking through Downton's church's lich gate, the quickest way back up to Downton. Janet just about remembered to nod her head in Milo's direction. What is it? Janet said, as they passed scaffolding and fierce excavation equipment, JCBs and dump trucks. She followed Georgie into the courtyard where already the outbuildings were gone. I need show you something real. In through the back door of the kitchen, past where Janet had found Milo's list of scientists, through into the hallway and up the stairs. Pausing for a second out of learned deference, Janet followed Georgie across Downton's grand entrance hall. Noticing him nod to the painting of Lady Violet, Janet nodded too, for luck, and followed Georgie up the main stairs, not managing to keep up his 2 stairs at a time pace. When he was at the top, Georgie turned and waited for Janet to catch him up. This way, he added, and went across the gallery corridor and into the side room. Across Georgie went until he got to a room of which he needed some strength to push the door open. It had been Lord Grantham's dressing room, and was now used for storage. Janet watched as Georgie pulled back the short carpet from near the wardrobe. Look, Georgie told Janet. He pointed to the floorboards, and to the edge of one of them. There was a gap, where somewhere in the floor's history, the plank had been taken up and not replaced very well. Georgie tugged at it, and it came up. Here, Georgie showed her. Wiring. Milo Ashby did this. Everyone knows this. My father told me about it. Grandfather Henry, whose name we must never mention, told him about it. Inside the void, the gap between the floor of Lord Grantham's dressing room and the ceiling below, about a foot, was some bright lengths of copper cabling. They stretched from side to side and were twisted together, with little joins about every 6 inches. Juncture joins. Georgie told Janet. It was how they got the copper to work all those years ago. It was still attached to the generator a few months ago, before the demolition. It still worked after all those years. He watched Janet look at the metal, now dulled, though not oxidized, for it had been hidden away in an enclosed space for so long, over 50 years ago, and Milo did this. Why, she couldn't have been more than, she put it in 1914, Georgie went on. We have the ledgers that Carson recorded it in. Grandmama's father, Robert, allowed her to do it. She was 10, Georgie, Janet told him. 10 years old and had learned how to wire a house. What were we doing when we were 10? Tearing around here. Chris was learning to make watches with your father. My father was teaching me about aeroplanes as Henry was teaching me about cars. He watched her, still looking at the cabling. I have to know about her. I have to find out, Janet said eventually, before lifting the floorboard back into place. I will make people tell me about her somehow. Someone watched them. Poor orphaned, widowed Sibby Bell. And a memory stirred. She was there for a reason. For someone. Georgie had forgotten he had invited her. He was here in England, making trouble. Sibby watched her cousin put back the carpet in Grandpapa Robert's dressing room. If it's going to be the time, she smiled, as she watched Georgie watch Janet. This will be it. Kiss her, you lump of a boy. Everyone knows how you both feel about each other. The moment passed. Sibby stepped back out onto the landing. She could try to dilute some of his mischief. She pressed her back against the wall of the old house. And then there was Downton Abbey. Not even she knew where she could beg, borrow or steal money for Aunt Mary to keep the house. Only treasure buried by pirates, perhaps, or an inheritance could be enough to satisfy Cousin George's death dues and keep away the diggers from any more accidental demolition. The door creaked. Sibby Branson snuck away. Well, if Janet Barrow wanted information about her grandmother, there was something that could be done. And her half-brother would have to lump it. Poor Janet Barrow. If only she knew then what she knew later. But by then, it was too late. And knowing about me Lucina Ashby could not be wished away. Why don't you find out about your grandmother now? There were people who knew her. You just don't want to go to speak to Lady Mary, Janet retorted, as they strode back down towards Downton Village. Georgie sighed. Come in with me. Speak to Grandmama. I'll meet you Janet told him. There's someone I need to see first. And Georgie Crawley watched her veer off in the direction of her granny and grandfather's house. She has been a ghost to us all these years, no one wanting to see her name, Daisy told Janet. Surprised by her granddaughter dropping in, and equally surprised when she had told her she wanted proper information about Milo, and she would find it out one way or another. So it would be better for all concerned to give their sides of the story. We wanted to heal after your father and mother fell in love with each other the minute he arrived. I couldn't have asked for a better man for our flower, yeah ma'am. His mildness, her liveliness. And what was Milo like? She saw Daisy look at the ephemera that Janet had laid out on the coffee table. Milo's seed packet, the list of names, the family tree. She was like herself. She loved lights and colors, and apples. Daisy laughed softly. Oh yes, apples. She was good and kind and intolerant of injustice. She loved Thomas, in her we, and Thomas her. She saved his life. He hers. But then Thomas became Guy's butler, and went to America. Daisy nodded. And then Chadwick got the Nobel Prize. And he heard from Milo again. She was in London and needed to see him, and Thomas had gone back to Downton after Guy had died. Daisy nodded again. Do you think she wanted to tell Thomas about Ernest? I don't know, Daisy admitted. She were in London for somewhat else. So many people. She wrote to me, Janet's granny told her. Complicated after that. But, if you're set, and you find out, I'll see what else I can remember. There was the Thomas Branson business, of course. But you'll know all about that. The Thomas Branson business. Janet held a straight face. nodding to her grandmother. What on earth did that mean? She was determined to find out. An hour later, and Janet Barrow was waiting in the hallway of the Dower House. Perhaps she oughtn't be there. Perhaps Georgie ought to be sharing this news without her anywhere about. She was about to turn to go when Anna, Lady Mary's elderly maid, opened the door for her. Janet bowed her head, but Anna smiled. "Lady Mary's expecting you," she told the surprised Janet, and was even more surprised when Georgie, sitting opposite his grandmother, beamed at her. "How delightful it is to see you, Miss Barrow. I hear from Lady Edith your column is coming along well. And from my grandson," Lady Mary nodded towards Georgie, "that you want to know more about your grandmother." "Yes, Lady Mary," and accepted Mary Crawley's invitation to sit and enjoy a tea. Ernest was a scientist. He fitted the electricity. "I remember seeing her work in plans. You look so like her, dear." And the Thomas Barrow affair. Janet, who had many more years to perfect the art of asking a speculative question and waiting for her interviewees to fill in the gaps. Within a quarter of an hour, both Janet and Georgie knew of her walk back to Downton, crippled and ill, mending the electricity without fuss or difficulty. How between Ernst and Thomas, Milo was nursed to the end. And when she had put herself between Thomas Branson's bullet and her son. "Does the name George Paget Thompson mean anything to you?" Or, James Chadwick? They were scientists, Lady Mary told them, and had been tracking Branson, though he had escaped that night and no one had heard from him since. "You will write, both of you, I expect," Lady Mary closed the visit with. "To one another, I mean, when Georgie goes up to Oxford." "I am sure I will," Janet was at pains to say aloud. "Well, that's settled," Lady Mary told them both. "Until you yourself go to Oxford." "I myself, Lady Mary?" Janet, composed as she had been for the entire visit, was now thrown. "Didn't my sister tell you? When you're old enough, and with your parents' permission. Of course, Edith would like a field reporter." "Not just." Lady Mary picked up a copy of The Lady open to the page near the back. "Janet's column about the countryside of Yorkshire." "I would indeed, gladly, Lady Mary," Janet managed, as she kept a firm check on her excitement, which was liable to bubble over, and would not be looked on kindly in the polite company of Lady Grantham. 88,888,888 soon, it will be autumn, and all the fruits of the trees will be harvested and made into preserves by the good ladies of Downton, of Yorkshire, of England. Janet read aloud to herself, that night. "Michael Elmers, as the terms of our esteemed universities would remind us, is the time of autumn where another beginning happens, vernal, hibernating, our landscape ready to sleep and awake bright and full of energy next March. I am Yorkshire, my family is Yorkshire, its moors and wetlands, its towns of 100 grocers, butchers, bookbinders, bakers. It is like this around our land, in bustling counties work like cogs in a clock, all separate but interlinked. Now is the time for England." "I like it," thought Janet, going back to the list of physicists, letters and names picked out by Milo with a shaky, unsteady hand. It meant something to her grandmother to make a list, and get it hidden behind a wooden panel underneath the sink. Who were these people? Janet knew it would not be long until she found out, and she would write what she could down, as if she was reporting for Milo. Her grandmother deserved celebration, deserved recognition, not silence. Janet was going to give her that. Light still on, new note page ready, and Downton's fledgling journalist was ready to put Milo Ashby onto the page.